I'm kind of mostly the representative of common sense here.
If relations cannot be explained, if there's no good way to explain how one thing can stand in a relation to another thing, then those relations are not intelligible or not real, including relations of distinction. And if there are no distinctions that are intelligible, then there's at most one thing. There's not a multiplicity of things because distinctions are unintelligible.
I'm kind of mostly the representative of common sense here. What's the situation in the physical world? The physical world, there's space and time. It's got lots of parts. There are things that the physicist John Bell called local beables that exist in different parts of space. There's a multiplicity of them. They are related to each other by spatio-temporal relations. There seems also to be another part of physical reality in quantum mechanics we call a wave function, which does have the characteristic of there's only one of it. It's a universal thing. It has a kind of holism to it. Very interesting discovery. But this picture of the world has both this single unified thing and, in addition, many different small things in different places that move around and change, and therefore can make sense of our experience as we're having right now. I would not trust any purely a priori argument that tells me that's wrong.
I completely reject the methodology whereby philosophy is subservient to common sense. So I understand what common sense point of view is. I'm a person like you all, and I have the same common sense, as it were, intuitions. But I don't think that philosophy should be guided by common sense or intuitions. Rather, philosophy should go where the reasons lie. And I think a methodology of philosophy that's beholden to common sense and intuitions is inevitably going to be a kind of conservative philosophy, and it may be also kind of an arbitrary philosophy, and one that's too psychologistic in a way. Parmenides says there's one thing you can't think about, and that's non-being. Let me tell you what you can't think about. Here it is, it's non-being. So in a way, he's actually crossing the limits of what, strictly speaking, makes sense according to his own view.
Okay.
Right? So his own view might seem to undermine itself, as does mine, and I view that as a virtuous feature of the view,
right,
not a bug, because the most extreme positions are ones which will ultimately, at the end, undermine themselves.
Things that are self-refuting are false, right? Things that are self-contradictory are false. I'm sorry, we know that. That's what it means to say it's self-refuting. It cannot be true. I mean, to say it's a feature of my theory that it undermines itself, I'm sorry, it's not a feature, it's a bug. Of course, if you go extreme enough that you're willing to say, the thing I like about my own theory is that it makes no sense according to itself, I mean, this isn't just common sense, this is just sense. I mean, what are you relying on? Parmenides had a mistaken view about how we can think about things.
My view is not false in the sense, because it's a kind of skeptical view which is challenging the coherence of our ordinary ways of thinking about things. So our views, our ordinary ways of thinking about things don't rise to the level of falsity. They're actually, strictly speaking, incoherent, I would say. And I would also say that to see as philosophers who get themselves into exactly this kind of situation, Wittgenstein does, I think, at the end of the Tractatus. He regards his own propositions, as some of them at least, as strictly speaking nonsense, as something that we can use as a ladder that we then have to kick away. A similar move is made by Sextus Empiricus, who uses the ladder image as well, and he says he's a skeptic about everything, including his own skeptical language, his own skeptical arguments. And he regards that as an extreme form of skepticism, as is my view, an extreme form of skepticism, in this case, conceptual skepticism. And I think that kind of skepticism must be taken seriously, and it can be taken seriously on the basis of rationalist consideration.
How you could think a skeptical argument like you'd get out of Sextus could let the principle of sufficient reason go. It's like, the problem with skepticism is it's a universal solvent. Yes, it ends up even trying to dissolve itself, as Sextus says. But you certainly can't be a skeptic and say, oh, by the way, it's all based in absolute acceptance of the principle of sufficient reason. That is immune to skeptical doubt. I mean, that's not a skeptical position at all. That's just a kind of dogmatism.
My arguments in general tend to be arguments against the coherence of realist metaphysics. And so I want to give up a realist metaphysics. And once we do so, I think that frees us up to say the same things in ordinary life that we've always been saying, and also to say new things. So I think the kind of liberatory potential for this kind of view is really great, potential for that view. And so I want to give up realist metaphysics, but I don't want us to be constrained into what we can do and choose to do with our words. I just insist that we devoid these words of realist metaphysical significance.
But there is a level at which the world can be described in sharp terms that we're after. And you should be very aware of the dangers that come.
To continue watching this video, click the link in the top left or in the description below. Or visit iai.tv for more debates and talks from the world's leading thinkers on today's biggest ideas.